It's good. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Glad you're here. Grab yourself a seat. Take a nice deep breath.
The readings for today are by Ernest Holmes. Put your mind in touch with universal mind, saying just what you are waiting for. Ask for it. Believe that you are receiving it and wait. After a few minutes, declare that you now know, even though you may not seem to know, yet in the depths of consciousness you have received the impression. Yes. Creation does not mean making something out of nothing. Creation is the passing of spirit into form and is internally going on. Spirit cannot change, for being all, there is nothing for it to change into. This is self-evident.
Well, I really like that song, and it is one of my favorite songs. And actually, he wanted me to buy something else for him, but I'm not sure about that. A dessert. Wasn't it a dessert you're going to get? Gluten-free dessert, yes. And, the song, the one thing in the song that I don't exactly agree with is when he says, it's easy if you try. Because sometimes imagination and creativity, sometimes it's easy, but sometimes it's not so easy. And my topic is creativity and imagination, and the working title, I sort of begin with a working title, and the working title is, or was, Open to the Energy of Creativity. So that's what I was thinking as I began to put things together. And I probably should ask you, do you feel creative? Do you feel pretty creative yourself? One guy I read in preparation for this is Ken Robinson, and he wrote, written a few books, but he wrote one called The Element. And he says in that book that he speaks to thousands of people, and he says he always begins by asking, how many of you feel pretty intelligent, rated on a scale of 1 to 10? And he says in his audience, people will say an 8, 9, 10, maybe a 7, but pretty high. And then he follows up by asking, how many of you feel creative? And he says the numbers always drop. They go way down, usually. Studies have been done to show that in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, children are usually pretty creative. I mean, they'll try anything. And if you ask, can you draw, as I used to, boats and tanks, can you draw? And little children will say, oh yeah, I could draw anything. I can do anything. But even by the time they get into elementary school, a lot of that drops out too. And so we almost, it seems, we educate creativity out of our children. There's a myth that says only special people are creative. That's just not true. The truth is that everybody's creative. Everybody has that potential inside of them. And we're born with that. And the trick is to be able to develop it because it's a skill. And some people even say that creativity is a state, that you can do certain things, and if you do those things, you can get into that state regardless of who you happen to be. So it's not just for special people. And another myth is that creativity is about special activities, because we have our creative domains like art and design and music, but creativity is used in everything. I mean, everything we see around us that human beings have made has come out of creativity. And so whether it's science or math or engineering, creativity is still alive and well in all of those things. And so when we open up to that energy inside of us, creativity does happen. You have incredible power. And I'm not just saying that because I had nothing else to say. You have creative power, creative potential, and the power of imagination. But we often, I believe, take it for granted. If you don't ask for it, you won't get it. If you don't ask, you won't receive. And so asking for ideas is an important aspect of creativity. Imagination is closely akin to faith, I believe, because you're working with ideas. You're working with things that you can't exactly see, but they're more real often than what we can see. Human beings are unique when it comes to creativity because animals have some form of creativity, but nothing compared to human beings. We have a couple birds in our front yard by the bush right beside our steps, and they have about 4 eggs, Mary Pat told me, in that nest. And so we have those little birds, and little birds are fun to watch, and they are creative as they build their nest, and they're creative as they sing, but birds don't write operas. Some animals are very agile, but you don't see them forming an Olympic committee, even though they do have lots of ability. Animals communicate, but they don't write books. I would swear sometimes that I've seen animals that are depressed, but I've never come in and found an animal listening to Miles Davis and drinking Jack and Coke. That just doesn't happen. My dog, when he was around and when he was alive, used to be really elated when he knew there were squirrels in the backyard, but he never wrote one poem about those squirrels, but he loved chasing them. Biologically, we have evolved, and animals have evolved, and all of us have evolved about the same way. But culturally speaking, human beings have evolved really quickly. We do all kinds of things, and all of that goes back to that creative spark, that energy inside of us. You can meet someone, you haven't seen them in a while, and you ask how they're doing, and they'll have answers for you. They'll tell you what they've been up to and what their activities are, maybe what their dreams are, maybe even their philosophy. If you meet a dog on the street, you could ask the dog, what have you been up to? And the dog's not going to really say anything. The dog might say, excuse me, may I urinate on your bush? Or something like that. But animals don't do that. And so humans have an amazing ability. And that ability comes down to creativity. And as I thought about this, and I thought long and hard about this, and I've thought about it a long time, but I'm just giving you my opinion. My opinion is I believe that we systematically destroy creativity in our children. Now, we've destroyed it in ourselves first, but then we destroy it in our children. We do it in our families, and we do it even in our school system. And I pick my words carefully because I'm not saying we deliberately do it, but I am saying we systematically do it. We have a plan to do it. We follow the plan. And the plan is, I want everybody to be the same. I want everyone to be quiet when they should be quiet. I was raised the child is to be seen but not heard. And even though we've moved beyond that philosophy, we still have a cookie cutter mentality sometimes with children. And so that's why I think children lose that beautiful spark inside of them, even at a young age. It makes me feel emotional just thinking about children that I've seen that have been so creative, and then you can see it crushed out of people sometimes. Sometimes it's not harsh. Sometimes it's just a frown. Sometimes it's just a negative comment. We want to be careful about that. Because if we move into the idea and we understand what creativity really is, we're going to judge less. We're not going to be critical. And don't come at me with a constructive criticism, because often constructive criticism hurts just as bad as something else. And sometimes it hurts people even more, especially the little ones. And you can see it in their eyes. You can see it as you talk to a little girl or a little boy, and you can see if your words are crushing them or not, if we pay attention. Creativity is an important thing to think about. Beauty, aesthetics. Beauty lifts us and transports us to another place. But sometimes instead of aesthetics, we're more into anesthetics. And that's when we try to put other people to sleep. I believe in our country we do that. I believe that we put our children to sleep sometimes. And we want to do the exact opposite, especially in a place like this. We want to believe in our children. And I'm saying children, but I'm talking to you as well. We want to believe in people that are around us, and we want to wake them up with their creativity. We want to wake them up. We want to fan the flame. And when we see something coming out, and it's just a tiny, tiny piece of creativity, we want to praise that creativity. We want to be careful how we look at people. We want to be careful how we speak to people, encourage people. Somebody said a long time ago, you never know what someone's going through, and so you want to be kind because you never know what's happening in that person's life. And that's absolutely right. Creativity is really important. It's one of the most important capacities, I think, that we have. And so much of it we take for granted and we don't even use it. Because if we don't ask it to come, it doesn't come most of the time. Benjamin Franklin said, three kinds of people in the world: those who are immovable, and those who are movable, and then those who move themselves and others. And I like that. And you and I want to be the kind of people that move ourselves and that move others as far as elevating and inspiring and lifting them. In all the study I've done about this, and I've actually done quite a bit at this point, people often will ask, can creativity be taught? Because some people believe, some kid is born with it and others are not. And the truth is, I believe it can be taught. It's not taught like you're teaching someone to drive a car. It's not taught just by giving instruction, but it's taught by mentoring. It's taught by inspiring. It's taught by modeling that kind of inspirational behavior in front of people. As far as the definition, I think of creativity, this is how it works. You have imagination, and then you have creativity, and then you have action. Those are the three steps: imagination, creativity, and then action. And my definition of creativity is it's the process of having original ideas. Ideas that in some way will lift and help other people. And so it is a process. Rarely do you get it right the first time. And so it's trial and error. So you do it again and you do it again and you practice. So it's a process. Because it takes a little time doesn't mean that you're not creative. And then secondly, it is original thinking. It doesn't mean it's original thinking with the whole world, but it means it's original thinking with you. And so when you have that idea, you go, wow, that's quite an idea. It's an aha kind of moment. And then thirdly, creativity is always about something you value. It's about something that's important to you. And so the truth is, I think often we are oblivious as hell. I think we are. Because we see people with such creativity and such beauty and such wonder inside of them, and we never mention it. We just let it drift by. God, we want to be different than that. And if anybody's going to be different than that, it would be exactly you. It would be us. We sometimes just don't see it. It's what namaste means. Namaste means the divinity in me understands and acknowledges and salutes the divinity in you. And that's called creativity. Because the creativity in me sees it happening inside of you, especially kids. But all of us are kids in a sense. I mean, we look larger, but we're still the same inside, I think. It's funny because we just miss it. And so I'm encouraging us to become hunters. What are we hunting for? Not rabbit, not quail. We're looking for creativity, and we know it's in every single person we meet. Hunters. We often miss it, and we even miss it in school. I read this past week, and I love this story about Paul McCartney. A guy told the story from Liverpool. He knew Paul. And he said that Paul tried out and wanted to learn to play a stringed instrument in Liverpool. Now, this is a true story. And the band person said, you just don't have any musical aptitude. And that was Paul McCartney. And again, you'll find it hard to believe, but there was another guy in that same school named George Harrison. And George Harrison wanted to play, and he wanted to be involved in the music, and he was told the same thing. He didn't qualify. Now, think about this. You're the band leader, and you have half the Beatles in your school. And they come and want to play music, and you say, nah, I don't think so. And then this guy told the other story, which I'd heard before about Elvis Presley. Elvis is in Memphis, and he's in high school, and he wants to join the Glee Club. And so he tries out, and the teacher, the lady, says, we can't really use you because your voice is really strange. And it would mess up our sound. And so I wonder how the Glee Club is doing now. You wonder. And so sometimes the point is sometimes we just miss it. We miss it. And so we want to be looking. We want to be searching. I've heard this story in different ways, but I heard the story this week that said a little girl, kind of shy, a little withdrawn, she's in class, and everybody's practicing their art project, and she's sort of over in the corner doing her art. And the teacher walks over and says, what are you doing? And she says, well, I'm drawing a picture of God. And the teacher says, well, I'm not sure that anybody really knows what God looks like. And she said, well, they will in a couple of minutes. And, I've heard that story in different ways, and I don't know where the truth of the story is, but I love that story. And if the little girl said that, I love that confidence, you see, that creativity, beautiful creativity. We can transport ourselves into other worlds. Oh, we could transport ourselves into other places, into other things. And it's absolutely transforming in our lives. You could take a little baby, hopefully a little baby of course, but you could take a little baby into the garden at night. You don't want to be taking stranger babies in the garden, but you have the little baby in the garden and you can point up at the moon, and the little baby will look at the moon. A pretty young child will look at the moon. Now you can take your dog out in the yard and you can point at the moon, and the dog will likely look at your finger and be very irritated if you keep doing it, because animals don't quite have that kind of creativity. It's a different kind. And so you have that capacity. Now, some people say it just comes out of your brain. And I'm happy to say that every person in here has one. You have a brain. You probably have not seen your brain, but you do have one. Everybody here in a physical body has one. And so some people say all of the creativity comes out of the physical brain. But I've got to think there's a spiritual aspect to the whole thing. I think a bird has a certain mechanism, and spirit expresses through that bird. So that bird is not going to write a book because that's not the mechanism, but spirit is expressing through the bird as the bird. Spirit is expressing through the cat as the cat, and expressing through the badger as the badger, and expressing through the human as the human. Spirit uses whatever mechanism we happen to have. And so I think there is a spiritual aspect to it. But there is a lot happening with our brains, and I think Spirit uses our brain in so many different kinds of ways. And so you may not be interested in this, but I am. In all the research that's been done about the physical and the brain and how that affects creativity. Let me share with you a couple things about this, and then I want to get into the spiritual. But there's a man named Jonah Lehrer, I believe his name is, and I looked through his book called Imagine. He talks about a Dr. Mark Beeman. And Beeman wanted to research what's happening in the physical brain as far as creativity and imagination. And he found a little piece, and Mark Daly is there, and he has one of these. It's on the right side, Karen, of his brain, and it's right behind his right ear. Truth is, all of us have one. It's just a tiny, he called it a little flap inside that brain, and just a tiny little area. And that little area has a specific job to do. And its job is this. It finds subtle connections between seemingly unrelated things. If you don't have that part, you couldn't do that. He says it helps us get jokes. It helps us understand metaphors. And it helps us with creativity. And so he wanted to study that, and he didn't know how to do it. He couldn't take people and shove them into an fMRI and study them that way, because maybe nothing creative was happening. And so he came up with this idea. Let's put them in this machine so we can see what's happening, and then let's give them puzzles to solve. And so that's exactly what he did. And he named the puzzle something with a very long name. The puzzle, the verbal puzzle, is called compound, remote, associate problems. Now, you may not have paid attention, but if you take those letters, it's crap. And so they became known as the crap puzzle. And so he would have 50 to 75 questions. He would put people in there. He would ask the questions, and then they would have 15 seconds to answer, and then he could see what's happening inside the brain. And what's really cool, at least to me, is that they would ask the question, they would show the words, and if the person got the answer about 30, 40 milliseconds before they gave the answer, that part of the brain would have a surge right on the right side, right behind the ear. And so he could tell that's where that activity is coming from when they get it. Now, I thought it would be fun, not that you would, but I thought it would be fun to give you a couple puzzles. And let's just see how you do. And when I did it in the first service, someone got it in 5 seconds. Everybody else was going, what? And so see how you do. Here's the idea. I'm going to give you 3 words, and then your job is to find a single word. I'm going to read this twice. A single word that can form a compound word with each of the 3. Let me say it again. You're going to find a single word that can form a compound word with each of the 3. So I'll give you 3, and then you come up with the 4th. Here we go. I'm going to just give you 2 examples. Number 1. This is just for my own entertainment. Here are the 3 words. Pine, sauce, crab. What's the 3rd that you could compound with those 3 words? I can't hear anything. 15 seconds. Who said apple? Apple is the answer. Apple, pineapple, applesauce, crab apple. Now you know how to do it, so let me give you one final one. Age, mile, sand. Holy cow, that's like 2 seconds. Stone. Stone Age, milestone, sandstone. That's pretty amazing. Who did it first over here? Carol. Good job. Did you already know the answer? Oh, okay. Very impressive. Okay, so the physical brain is involved in creativity, but if you step back and look at it, there's so much more happening from a spiritual perspective. In ancient Rome and ancient Greece, when they talked about creativity, they didn't believe creativity came out of the brain. They didn't believe it came out of the human heart. They believed that creativity was from a divine attending spirit that came to individuals and gifted them outside of themselves. And they called the divine attending spirit demons. Now, demons to us, it's a negative term because of the way it was used in the Bible. But before that, it simply meant a disembodied spirit. Didn't have to be negative at all. In fact, Socrates, if you ask him, where did all your wisdom come from? He would say, well, I have a special demon that comes from far, far away and whispers in my ears, and then I simply tell people what I'm told. Now, that's interesting, isn't it? It's very interesting. The Romans had the same idea, but they didn't call it a demon. They called it genius. They didn't apply genius to a clever human being. They thought of genius as a disembodied spirit that would come and speak to them. It's interesting. I think the ideal is brilliant to think about it that way, because then you don't get so attached to the idea. Far less narcissism if you think it's coming from some spiritual source than if you think, hey, I'm really hot, look what I came up with. And you know that would be true. So, and it takes the pressure off because you're just being open. You're being a channel. And so it takes the pressure off, which means you create more and more and more. There's lots of examples of this, but this is a beautiful book. This is about Bill McDonald, our own Bill McDonald. Yeah. And there it is. And he has another one in the works, but this is a tremendous, and everything, the art, it's absolutely beautiful. Not in the bookstore yet, but it will be. But you know, he and I may not get it exactly right, but he went outside and had his computer, and he just said, in like an hour or two, he had the book. Isn't that kind of weird? And he would say, he would say, well, yeah, I don't know where it came from. I wasn't even thinking about it, but here it is, and it's a tremendous book. It's great for children, but great for adults, really, too. And his other book is going to deal with forgiveness, which is wonderful. So that's the kind of thing that can happen. But sometimes you have to, in some way, be open. You've got to be willing and open for something like that to happen. And then just stand back and allow it to flow through us. It's a beautiful thing. So Spirit, you're driving down the road or doing whatever you're doing, and Spirit drops an idea into your mind, and you want to treat it like a newborn baby. You want to treat it like a newborn baby. It's like you finally get the fire started, so you want to lightly blow on the fire. You don't want to blow it out, but you want to honor it, and you want to celebrate it, and you want to pay attention to it. And you don't want to say mean things like, well, I don't think I could ever do that. And you want to write it down, because if you don't write the idea down, often we never remember the idea. I believe, and I think you probably do too, that divinity flows through us. Divinity knows everything. And it probably flows through you every single day. I read about a poet, I heard about her before. Her name is Ruth Stone. I'm not sure she's still in the physical. If she is, she may be close to 100 years old, but she lived in Virginia. Great poet, beautiful words. She worked in the fields, rural Virginia. And she said she would be working and then bam, it would happen. And she said she could hear it coming. Now listen to that. So I get chills thinking about it because I can understand that. So you hear it coming, and she said it like this. It's like a thunderous train of air that would just move toward me and move through me. And she's talking about the words that would become the poems. She said she would run out of the field and run into the house as quickly as she could so she could write it down. I don't know why she didn't have a notebook with her, but apparently she didn't. And she said, sometimes I make it and I get the words down, and then sometimes I don't, and the words are gone. And so that kind of creativity is beautiful. And that probably happens to you in one way or the other if you pay attention and not taking it for granted. One of my sons turned me on to Tom Waits a long time ago. Do you know Tom Waits? Musician, singer? I like Tom Waits. Interesting guy, has some weird songs, weird sounds. And I would have to say, man, that guy is really super creative. And you're listening to him, and he said it was like that. He said, I don't know where these songs come from. I don't know where these ideas come from. They just sort of come from something. And he said, one time I was driving down the road, and the idea came of the music and the words to the first part of it. And he said it was just all complete. You know, Paul McCartney dreamed the Let It Be, I think it was. Wasn't it Let It Be? I think it was Let It Be. One of the big songs, he just dreamed of it and woke up and wrote it down. But Tom Waits said this, excuse me, can't you see I'm driving? He said, why don't you go bother somebody else? Maybe go see Leonard Cohen, he said, instead of coming to me, because I'm driving right now. Come back to me later. You ever talk to the air like that? I mean, you're talking almost like to spirit that's around you and that's giving you a gift. It's a mystical kind of thing. So you may be wondering where you fit. And so I have a little chart. Here it is. Bam. And Greg, what was his name? Greg Fraley, because I read a few things, and Greg Fraley had this little chart, and I thought, I like that chart. And it shows it's a quad, and you would be in one of those quads, creatively speaking. Let me mention some of them and see where you might place yourself. Now, we have, they say, 65,000 thoughts a day. That's a lot of thoughts, and there's a lot of creative thoughts in there. Sometimes, if you're drinking, you may have 80,000 thoughts. If you're going through a divorce or a separation of some kind, you might go up to 100,000 in a day. So that's a lot of thoughts. And so this shows how we deal with those thoughts. And so let me just mention these four. The first one, you could be a zombie. I'm not trying to insult you, but you could be. And a zombie is low awareness. You know, wouldn't know anything if it hit them in the head. And low intention, meaning they don't really do much either. So low awareness, low intention. You know what a zombie looks like, and so that's what it's like. So they make no active use of their imagination. They would never say to their mind, give me a picture, give me an image, give me an idea. They don't ask for anything. They're zombies. They're just kind of walking around. The living dead kind of thing. Now, if you want to motivate somebody like that, who's married to a zombie? Raise their hand. No, I'm just kidding. So if you're in a relationship with a zombie, thank you, honey. That was not planned at all. But you would say, hey, Bill, we've got a problem here. Could you come up with 3 or 4 ideas that might help? And the zombie will go, and maybe come up with something if you ask. So that's a zombie. Or you may be a dreamer. Now, a dreamer has high awareness, low intention. Dreamers are wonderful people. I have been accused of being one of those, especially earlier in my life. A dreamer is aware of everything. imagination. My mother said an overactive imagination. You're writing things down even. You carry a notebook so you can record what's going through your mind. So I enjoy imagining. I enjoy that. I enjoy the imagination. I'm aware of the imagination. I like dreaming. But the problem with a dreamer is they don't do much. Anybody married to a dreamer? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you again. Now, they notice lots of things. They know what's happening around them. They really know. They're very aware. But then they sit and think about it. They philosophize. They do lots of inner thinking, so no action taking. So if you happen to be a dreamer, that's fantastic. But you may want to take a course on actually getting up and taking action, doing something. The third one, Greg called a manager. And a manager has low awareness, but high intention. A manager is the woman or the man who really knows how to get things done. Not visionary, not really thinking all that much, but they can get a job done. Elvis Presley had a thing around his neck, and he gave all of his guys who worked with him a ring that said TCB, taking care of business. And so that's what a manager is. I'm taking care of business. What are you dreaming about? What? Not dreaming about nothing. I'm just taking care of business. And this can be compared, Greg said, to a gangster or a gang leader who's not really thinking very much, but they know how to get the money out of somebody if they're trying to get the money. And so they know how to do that. And then finally, the leader. And of course, for this group, that's probably all of you would fit into that group. There's no doubt. This would be the ideal place to be. This person is aware. So they're tuning in all the information. They're writing it down. They're remembering it. They're thinking, how can I apply this? How can I use this? How can I share this with others? And then they're taking action, and they're actually doing things physically. They're tuned in. So I'm not going to ask where you happen to be. If you want to be a leader, I'll mention a couple things real quick. If you want to be a leader, the first thing you can do, and this will sound counterintuitive, I know, the first thing you want to do is relax. Because you think, I'm going to be creative, I need to squeeze really hard. Well, they say the best thing to do is relax. And like Albert Einstein, one of the smartest people that we have produced over the last 150 years. Do you know what he loved doing? Fiddling around. He played violin. He played violin for hours. He loved playing music. And the second thing he loved to do is he loved walking in the woods. Can you picture that? Him with the hair, playing, walking in the woods. And so all of that accumulates. And as he's doing all of that, he's thinking. And so being relaxed really helps. Another inventive guy, Thomas Edison, he had a copper ball that would fit into the palm of your hand. And so he would be working in his lab. He would be confused, not know exactly what to do. He would lie down on his couch, put himself into that place between sleep and being awake, and he would ask the question before lying down, and then he would, and then when he falls asleep, of course, the ball falls out of his hand, hits the floor, wakes him up, and he said, 9 times out of 10, he would have the answer. And we know why that is, because when you take a little nap, one side of your brain sort of stays awake, the other side kind of shuts down, and it's like a self-cleaning oven. It sort of cleans things up just a bit. So when you wake up, everything looks a little different after a 15, 20-minute nap. So it makes a big difference. But those are things you're doing. So I want to be practical. And so let me conclude by I'm going to give you 6 steps on how to increase your creativity. Number 1, and these are quick. Number 1. These are tips. Number 1, usually there's a challenge or a problem of some kind, so you want to define what the problem is. You want to think, okay, this is the situation. This is the difficulty. And so you get clarity on what you're sort of asking for, number 1. Number 2, you provoke the answer. Jesus said, ask and it will be given. Ask and it will be given. So in creativity, if you have a problem, sometimes we call somebody and we say, I got a problem. What do you think I should do? But I'm going to suggest the first person you want to ask is you. You want to ask the entities that surround you, however you think about it. You want to ask, because if you ask, often it is given. So you invite it in. Number 3, when the idea comes, you honor the idea. Don't make light of it. And you write it down. Maybe you have a notebook and you write the ideas or the idea down and you celebrate it. Now, if your neighbor gets a great idea and you see them carrying it out, Don't be jealous. Because if you're jealous, you're going to shut yourself down. You want to say, God, let's have a party. And you celebrate that idea just like it's your idea, and then pretty soon your ideas will begin to come. They'll grow. Number 4, be optimistic. Be expectant. Expect something really different to come, because you never know what the tide is going to bring in. Anything is possible in a universe like this. Anything is possible. So be optimistic. Number 5, be willing to take a risk. Most people don't express creativity because they're afraid they're going to make a mistake. You're sitting at a table with other people and you have this idea and you think it's a pretty good idea, but you don't say anything about it because other people may look at you funny. And so you want to be able to rise above that fear and be able to take a risk. We call it mistake. Take. It's like a movie. Mistake. And so we're just going to film it again, but now you have more information because there is no failure. There's just more information. And now you know another way that doesn't work so that you can get on with doing it. Studies have been done on rappers. Rapping decreases the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Let me say that again. Dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. That's what produces inhibition. And so as a rapper begins to really get into it, the fear of failure disappears. Happens also, they say, with jazz musicians. When jazz musicians are asked to improvise, then there's no fear. How could you play if you're so scared of, is this the right note? Is that the right note? And so you rise above all of that. And there's something about that, you see, allowing and rising above the fear. And then I wanted to mention sleep one more time. Not just a nap, but sleep. And that's number 6, because sleep is really important. Mary Pat knows this, but I will read I probably read at least 10 books and listened to 10 or 12 lectures over the last 2 weeks about creativity. And what am I doing? Pouring it. It's like my brain is just a bucket. And I'm just pouring it all in. And it often gets so jumbled, I don't know what's up there. I don't know what's going on up there. And if I think about, okay, I need to present these ideas, I don't have a clue how to present the ideas. Not any. And then that's when you go to sleep. And when you go to sleep, you say, now how can I present this? And I swear, so often you wake up and all of that jumble is now ordered. Do this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's really cool. And if someone says, wow, that was a nice outline you had there, you don't really feel like you even did it. It just kind of came from somewhere else. And so I don't know whether it's the brain or whether it's spirit or what it is, but with you it's the same thing. Sleep is a good thing to do because sleep kind of organizes things. Creativity is like oxygen. I think we feel best when we're creative, and when we feel best, we are super creative. Hatching an idea is like baking bread, because an idea needs to rise, because an idea is alive. It's alive, you see. And so when you get that little tiny idea, don't toss it out. You want to care for it and feed it. You don't want to be like with bread. If you're opening it up and poking the bread all the time, it's never going to rise. And so you let it cook inside of you for just a bit. It's amazing how ideas work like that, and it creates tremendous energy. That great boxer, world famous boxer Mike Tyson said this. Jim, you ready? I mean, if Mike Tyson's going to say it, it's going to be good. And I keep wanting to imitate him because I'd like to hear imitations, but I'm not going to do it. Okay, so, no, I'm not going to do it. I've heard Mike Tyson do some speeches. I've enjoyed him talking. He had a rough childhood. He did. He said this, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Now, see, that's true. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And so we may have a plan, but life throws punches at us sometimes. And it's really just an opportunity to be thrown against the wall and to become creative. Because that's when we become most creative. When we have a problem, when we have a dilemma, when we're pressed against the wall. And it's really just a matter of where do we place our attention. And so you, my friend, are a magnificent creator. You have access to powers and knowledge and information so far beyond your physical brain that we cannot even imagine what it is. And I'd suggest if you're having 80,000 thoughts a day or 60,000 thoughts a day, some of those ideas are amazingly creative and beautiful and powerful. They could change the world. They could change your family. They could change your life. They could change something. An original idea that makes things better. And so you have those all the time. So honor those. Love those. I mean, I keep thinking they're just like little chickens. We call them in Kentucky dittlers. A little dittler is just a little yellow creature. And it's just so cute and so little. And that's what an idea is. And so you want to be so sweet to it and feed it and keep it warm and shelter it from harm. Because who knows what it will come into. And as you do that, as it begins to flow to you, through you, more and more flows through you, and it becomes really, really powerful. Just about anything can happen. And it starts on the inside. Let's turn within and have prayer. Well, I enjoy this. I enjoy friends getting together like this. And I enjoy all of us reaching higher. We're not even near our limit, but at least we're reaching higher. And now we're hunters. So if we see a young teenager today offering us spaghetti, we're going to look into his or her eyes and we're going to see the beauty and the creativity. We're going to do that with people we hang out with all the time. It could bring tears to your eyes if you knew how much you've missed by not looking into eyes. So now we know. So now we're going to look into those eyes. You must conceive it in order to receive it. So that's how it starts. And we expect our circumstances to change because if we just change a little thought like this, then everything changes, everything shifts. So we expect favor. We expect to be in the right place at the right time. We expect people to go out of their way to help us as we go out of our way to help them. Creativity is so closely associated to love, I think. And so we expect blessing. We expect abundance. There's a song that my friend Karen sings. And in that song, she would say, people get ready. There's a train a-coming. And so that's what I'm saying to you and me. People get ready. There's a train a-coming. And that train is full of ideas and full of beauty and full of love and just amazingly beautiful. People get ready. There's a train a-coming. You don't need no ticket. You just get on board. That is a great idea. A great song. And it's absolutely true. And so we open our minds, we open our hearts, and we receive all of the beauty and all the blessings, and we are ready to pass it on to others as well. So we're thankful for this day, and we say together, and so it is. Thank you very much.